Hi, everyone. It's Kristin. I just wanted to provide a little note before we jump into my next podcast because it's really special one for me. As you may or may not know, Be Global by Design is brand new. It's a small operation, and I have been working to expand my network. So, through one of the organizations that I'm part of, Culture Source, I was able to meet Gary Andersen. And Gary just really excited me by the comments he would make and the advocacy he was doing for funding in the arts. So I was very grateful since he has done so much and is so accomplished when he agreed to come on my podcast without even knowing me. And I messed up. I recorded the first one. it- And well, the recording of the podcast was the most difficult experience I've had so far with any of my podcasts. I've figured out a way to string these together, but just so you realize that Gary came on, and during that first podcast, I had technical difficulties that I had never had before. We recorded with fits and starts because of the technical difficulties. We finally recorded the whole podcast only to find out that 2/3 of it never got recorded. At least his voice was not on the recording. So he was gracious enough to agree to re record this for me. And we had a fantastic conversation, maybe the best conversation I've had on a podcast so far. And only when we got to the end did I realize I never hit the record button. So Gary was gracious enough to do it a third time for me. So what you're going to hear right now is parts of our first conversation and then our third conversation. And I'm so grateful for Gary for coming out. And please go and see the upcoming show at Plowshares Theatre, Roberto Clemente, A Diamond Within. It's going to be June 5th to the 28th. For details, go to plowsharestheatre.org. It's PLOWSHARESTHEATRE.org. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you as an audience, and I'm grateful that you tune in to Be Global by Design Cafe. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome back to the Be Global by Design podcast. Today I'm talking to Gary Andersen, who is the co-founder and producing artistic director for the Plowshares Theatre in Detroit. In addition to his work with the theater, Gary is an advocate for arts funding. Welcome, Gary.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Can you tell me a little bit about your background with the Plowshares Theatre
Sure,
and,
go-
and
I'm
what
one
the
of the
theater is?
yeah, that's okay. I'm one of the founders of Plowshares Theater Company. I call myself the surviving founder because my partner left after the third season.
Okay.
So I've been exclusively in this position since 1993.
Wow.
Plowshares is Michigan's only professional African American theater company.
Very cool. And based on your background with this theater, why do you think theater matters to communities?
Theater is one of the ways in which we bring community together. I mean, when you think about it, we invite a group of strangers into a dark room to listen to somebody tell them a story.
Hmm.
And when we go into that experience of telling that story, we actually create a sense of community by everybody experiencing it simultaneously. And it's not just like with a movie where the audience is the only live engaged part of it. The actors who are also on stage engage with the audience. I've directed for over 30 years, and I've told my cast on a repeated basis, they have to understand the audience is the last element that really has effect on this performance. And so we believe that we've seen it evident in the work that we've done. And I
Hmm.
think it's important for us to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. And no two productions, even of the same play, are ever the same either.
No, you can do a show on Thursday and then there's another show Friday and Saturday, and each one of them will be distinctly different because of the people who are sitting in the seats watching.
Interesting. And the first time we spoke together, you said something that was interesting to me. Theater really was one of those things that we started way back from the very beginning of man. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's part of my ideas about why we need to go back to the original reasons why we create the arts. I think the arguments that we use today are insufficient to really talk about the benefits that the arts have for civil society. And what I mean what I mean by that is that, in the ancient world, and even
Yep.
before the Greeks, or
Mhm.
or back in Africa,
Mhm.
ancient humanity didn't create the arts for economic benefit purpose. They created because they felt compelled to express themselves and also share that expression with others. So, we had paintings, we had dances, we had music, and then when we had written language, we crafted poems and plays. And the whole purpose of that was to really engage ourselves in an investigation of humanity and starting with our own experience. And artists have always been, when they've understood their job well, artists have always been the most sensitive, so that they can actually experience and interpret their experiences to share that with others. That's how we create a sense of commonality in our humanity. We create original works that
Mhm.
then help others see that their experiences aren't unique or their own, that it's a shared human experience. And the idea being that we can work towards improving how we function in the world by people knowing there is something of importance there.
So, Gary, you were just talking to me about the importance of theater and community theater to communities and why it matters and how we have always had theater as part of our societies. You have a new play coming to the Marlene Boll Theatre in June. Tell me
Right.
about the play and about the playwright.
Oh, we're really excited about it. It's a play we've been developing for 2 years. It's called Roberto Clemente, A Diamond Within. It kind of tells the story of Roberto Clemente, the Afro-Puerto Rican baseball player.
Okay.
He played on the Pittsburgh Pirates
Uh
and
huh.
was really, really integral in regards to fighting for civil rights for Black and Latino players within the baseball as well as within the community at large, the nation. He was very much involved in that process. He is one who suffered discrimination on two fronts,
Okay.
both as a Black man and as a Latino,
Uh huh.
and disrespect on a regular basis. Perfect example. He was named Roberto,
Uh huh.
and the newspaper reporters in Pittsburgh wanted to constantly call him Bobby or Bob out of his name, and that wasn't his name, and he didn't want to be called those names. He wanted to be called Roberto. He was described as being lazy and pampered, but he had injured his back early in his career, and so throughout most of his professional career, he played with severe pain. Yeah, yeah, and he also assisted several important Black players during the 50s, 60s, and 70s in regards to gaining greater respect. He was a close friend with Willie Mays. He was also one of Kurt Flood's pronounced Kurt Flood, who attempted to become first free agent. So a lot of the things that we're looking at trying to bring greater freedom, greater control, greater agency for baseball players in general, he was involved in actually pushing those things forward. He was extremely sincere humanitarian. In fact, baseball's humanitarian award today is named after Roberto Clemente.
That's amazing. Why do you think it's important to share these kinds of stories in a theater setting?
I think storytelling is always really important for us because it gives us an opportunity to reflect on not just individuals, but on humanity itself. I see all art, as an investigation of what it is to be human
Uh,
and to understand how we navigate a life. To tell a story about Roberto Clemente helps us understand, in some cases, many of the things that we're going through now with restrictions on freedoms and access to power that
Yep.
exist in our society, and also gives us an understanding that achievements in those kind of progress movements sometimes don't happen within the lifetime of an individual, but they happen because of the impact that the individual's actions had in subsequent years and lives of people who follow them in that mission. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about the playwright Cándido Tirado? What can you tell me about him?
Cándido Tirado.
Okay.
He himself also is Afro-Puerto Rican. He was brought up Brooklyn. He's a New York native. And so why am I collaborating with a New York native about a play about a player who played for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I'm in Detroit? I have really admired Candido's writing for years.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a great play that I'm looking at doing later on called Fishman.
Uh-huh.
But he and I got to know each other through the suggestion of another Latino artistic director several years ago, a guy named Eddie Torres, who ran a theater in Chicago. And I was looking to try to create a baseball play at that time
Huh?
about looking at the issues of identity
Mm-hmm.
and access to power and the challenges that both Black and Latinos had in regards to that. And I thought baseball was a perfect place because that was an arena that we could all identify with.
Yeah.
And it was also a place where those two ethnic communities had in some cases been pitted against one another. That project never got off the ground. That was something that was 26 years ago, never got off the ground.
Okay.
But I kept thinking about looking for allies. And during the pandemic, I created a program called Black Theater Latin Roots,
Uh-huh.
where I wanted to explore the history of Latino artists
Okay.
and the Afro-Latino communities.
Yeah.
We brought 11 to 12 million Africans to the New World.
Yeah.
Only about 300 to half a million were deposited in continental United States.
Yeah.
The rest, in fact, the majority of them were deposited in Central America, Caribbean, and South America.
Yep.
And those are all Black folks. And if
Mhm.
I'm a Black theater, I'm telling the stories of Black folks that expand beyond the borders of this country. And
Yeah.
so I thought that it would be good for us to start looking at how we could develop stories about people who came from other parts of the Americas.
Interesting.
And and
Yeah.
so we kind of combined that old idea I had about doing a play about baseball and Black and Latino players, and this desire to start telling the stories of African peoples within the Americas. And so it became one. It became an opportunity for us to kind of combine something that I had held on to for decades and this new initiative kind of pulled that together
That's
because I
awesome.
thought yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's not a one and done. This is not the only play we're doing in this area. The idea is to build this as a form of our play development initiatives as we go forward. So we could start telling all host of stories of of Africans from the Dominican community. We want to incorporate more dance into the work we do so we can show the breadth and depth of the fusion of African dance and rhythms that have been connected to Latin and indigenous dance traditions.
That's amazing. That'll be awesome. You're telling the stories of America, basically.
Yes,
Americas,
exactly.
right? Like, because
Exactly.
all of this impacts all of us. Yeah.
hmm
And
hmm
but we don't know the stories, and it's good.
Right.
It's a good forum to be able to understand and to hear and to see what those impacts have been over the years. And with that, one of the things that you advocate for a lot is arts funding,
hmm
and there's been a real lack of it recently.
hmm
And so, tell us a little bit about arts funding in Michigan. What is the state of arts funding?
Arts funding in Michigan is really sad, to
Mm.
be honest with you. And it's gotten progressively worse. Plowshares Theatre was founded. We established ourselves as a business in 1989. We began producing in 1990. And what actually was the focal point of all the changes, the dynamic alterations that occurred that we're still suffering with now occurred in 1991. So we didn't get really a chance to breathe in regards to growing an organization. And what that was is that in the 1990 gubernatorial campaign, the incumbent Jim Blanchard ran against a challenger, Republican challenger, a little known state senator from the western part of Michigan named John Engler. And one of John Engler's platform positions was to eliminate the state arts agency, just get rid of it. He thought it was a boondoggle, a waste of money. He didn't think it did anything in any way, shape, or form to impact positively the economy of Michigan, or that it had any real benefit to the general public. Now, this was at a time when Michigan was number 2 in the nation, behind New York City, New York State, in regards to how much it appropriated to the arts.
Wow. I didn't know
So
it
we
was
were
that much.
more than per capita than California, more than per capita than any other state in the nation.
I mean, the DIA was the art institute outside of New
It
York City in the US to
still
go
is.
to. Still
It's
is.
one,
It still
yeah.
is. But
The DIA is a top art museum in the world. Let's put that in context so we
yeah,
understand it. But a lot of that, but the whole thing is that we had other benefits to a much more generous arts funding environment prior to John Engler. We had the ability for many individual artists to be supported and sustained here. We had the development of a tri status arts community. And what I mean by that is we had smaller organizations, mid-sized organizations that could eventually become larger organizations over time if they were invested in, if they were supported. And we had a substantial group of large organizations, primarily in the southeastern Michigan, Metro Detroit area. So it wasn't perfect, but it was a strong one, a strong arts and cultural environment.
okay.
Engler came in and he kept to his word. He issued an executive order his first year in 1991, and he got rid of the State Arts Council. What he did next was he took the functions of the state, and the State Arts Council at that time, prior
Yeah.
to him, was its own department, like its Department of Commerce, like its Department of Corrections, like its Department of Education. It was its own department. They had their main offices down here in Detroit. And what he did when he decided how he was going to reconfigure it is he took this at one time full department, he reduced it down to the size of putting it as an agency inside the Michigan Department of Commerce. And he changed the function of it to be one that is designed to have economic benefit. Now, today, the Michigan Arts and Culture Council is what it's called,
Yeah.
is an agency within the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is inside the Michigan Department now. So it's now lower, in a lower level than it
Yeah.
was when he reformed it back in 91, all
Yeah.
by an executive order.
Yeah.
And its only purpose for the only way in which we benchmark success is if the art has economic benefit, economic impact.
Right. It's got to feed into the Economic Development Corporation, and it
Well,
denies the social and other benefits that arts has.
but under Engler, one of the things that he did was that he rejiggered how the funds were available. Prior to him, all of the funds, for the most part, were available through competitive grants.
hmm
He began to take portions of the budget and use them as appropriations to specific organizations.
That
So,
sounds a little bit like a boondoggle.
yeah. But they were organizations that either benefited donors of his, or in some way, shape, or form, they played into a narrative that he could articulate that supported the positions of conservative Republicans. For example, the Henry Ford at that time in the 90s built the IMAX theater that they currently have as part of their campus there. That whole corner is a gift, for the most part, from the state of Michigan. Now, here's an interesting thing. Many people can't remember the last time they went to that venue to see an IMAX movie.
Yeah.
But that was our taxpayer dollars that went into building that facility. And so you really have to think, when you think about economic impact, when you think about public benefit,
Yeah.
you really have to question, was that a real wise
Right.
expense of our money?
Right. Right. And why? Well, where is Michigan now in terms of ranking?
I can tell you that we are, I think it's 28th
Okay.
in there.
So number 2 to 28.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll get into this a little bit more detail. If you compare us to other Midwestern states, we're really in a bad shape. Right now, Michigan spends per capita, and we have about 10 million people in the state of Michigan. We spend 97 cents per citizen on the arts.
That's
It's
really
less than
low.
it's less than
It's
a
really
dollar.
low.
So who's the champion in the Midwest? It's
Yeah. Who?
Minnesota.
Wow.
Minnesota spends $10.
And you see it, right? I mean, you see
You
what they're
see it.
able to do. Like, you see the impact of it. They're able to
Right.
have these creative resistance to the ice and really like stand up, and it brings them together, right?
You definitely see the impact of having a much more robust arts and cultural community in that state because it inspires introspection, it inspires sense of curiosity and critical thinking, and it inspires people to think, understand that if you're going to have a principle, if you're going to say you live on a set of ideas, that you follow those up with your actions. I mean, here's the thing that I keep going back to, trying to remind people. The arts were designed not as an economic instrument. They weren't here when you think about the ancient world. People who were living very difficult lives, who
Hmm.
worked from can't see in the morning to can't see at night. They didn't
Hmm.
have leisure time. And
Yeah.
so if these people were investing time and energy into painting cave walls or beating metal into statues or ornaments or jewelry or creating dances or songs, they were doing that for a much more important reason. They were doing that so that they could express themselves to a world in hopes that that world will understand who and what we are. When I said that the arts investigate humanity, what I mean by that is that they are a way in which we project what we value and what we believe to
Yeah.
other people. I mean, you can see that embedded in the art that a person does. Who they are, what they really value is presented there. They didn't do it so they could put a Starbucks on the corner. They didn't do it so they could add 50 new jobs to the local economy. They
That's
did
right.
it because they needed to express themselves to the world around them, and they had to share their understanding of what life was or is.
Yeah, and it was a communal way of living too, and
Exactly.
we've seen that
Exactly.
too. Yeah, I wrote a report once for a project in India that,
Hmm.
to get to this area of India, you had to
Hmm.
go through a bamboo forest. I don't know. I've never been through a bamboo forest. I did some research.
Uh,
Walking through bamboo like grows quickly and it
uh,
grows tangled and it's very strong. So to walk through the forest uphill would
uh,
take you, just to get like a mile, will take you about 4.5 hours to get there because it's
uh,
so
uh,
difficult and so thick to get there. So
uh,
this community doesn't leave a lot, right? They don't have a lot
uh,
of trade networks. But what they had were festivals. They
uh,
had communal rituals around
uh,
eating and drinking
uh,
and things like that. So
uh,
they're obviously not doing these things for economic benefit for themselves,
absolutely.
but it's part
Absolutely.
of their lives. And it's something that's important that we have and that we bring people together with.
Right. And if you look at our world right now, you look at the fact that we have this mass shooting epidemic
Yeah.
in this country, that we have a dehumanization of citizens and individuals. I mean, this mass deportation madness is not just trying to address some problems that we have with our immigration in this country. It's basically trying to destroy people. And you see it in a way that that they're being treated. And you see it in the fact that two American citizens were killed simply because they were doing what they could to
Yeah.
assist people in need. and and I think that needs to be understood. This is a country that now legally gives the same to corporations that does to people in regards to supporting political candidates.
Yeah.
And those are values that are being communicated every day through a lot of the work, a lot of the art that we get. And if our world is based on that type of value system, if our work, if our lives, if our whole culture is structured on that type of value system, the exploitation of others for the benefit of a small group, we're really in danger.
Yeah.
What we need right now is a counter narrative.
Hmm.
And that the arts are a powerful tool for countering these kind of negative things. Because I'm going to tell you right now, the way we're going is not a healthy avenue for a future that is prosperous.
Sure. So, what are some examples of states that are doing this well for arts
Well,
funding? How do you
gave
do
you
it?
one. I
Minnesota,
gave
but
you.
how? What are the techniques?
So one of the things that they did back in 2008 during the Great Recession, they passed constitutional amendment that it was the legacy amendment to their state constitution, which required them to do a state tax, 3/8 of 1% across the board to raise dollars for education, for clean air, water, and land initiatives, and for arts and culture. And so out of that initiative, the Arts and Culture Fund, which is what it's called today,
Yeah.
has been, gets 19 and a quarter, less than 20% of the money that comes out.
Okay.
Now, so over time, as they've raised those dollars through that tax mechanism, they've generated in the last 18 years like $1.2 billion
Wow.
just for the arts, just for the arts.
And people aren't leaving the state because they,
People aren't leaving the state. People aren't divesting. People aren't all the threats that keep being told to us here in the state. None of that stuff has materialized. The community is vibrant. The community is stable. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's far much better than our conditions. I mean, Michigan, like I said, that's how they get to that $10.07 rate. That's how
Mhm.
they're able to spend that much money on the arts and still have money for free lunch and free breakfast for kids at school. That's how they're able to do much of the good that they do in the state of Minnesota.
So, not only is it about collecting more money, like if you
Mhm.
had your perfect situation for Michigan funding, it would be raising more through taxes or other means, but how would it get distributed?
Well, that in Minnesota is a tax authority, and so that comes out through competitive grants. So they have an arts fund that does regranting. That's just the structure, the way it does. There are other ways that we could do it that could also assist here. One of the things that I think would be really beneficial is if we enhanced on an individual giving basis the concept, got away from donor advised funds and
Mhm.
and thought more seriously about giving circles, getting
Yeah.
people to think seriously about collectively supporting organizations or missions that they want to see in the world. The
Oh, that's
reason
a good
why I say that,
idea. Yeah.
see, the reason why I say that is because donor advised funds are right now the prime movers at these community foundations across the nation that are trying to halt or divest gifts to the Southern Poverty Leadership Center. That just because the Trump administration has slapped them with charges of supporting racism, which is
Right.
laughable.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
In giving circles, you have of the restrictions of some kind of
That's right.
board that's controlling how those dollars are awarded.
Yes.
And but it also gives you a hand in how those monies are distributed. With a giving circle, you and your family, or you and like-minded friends and community members, or you like at a sorority or fraternity or some other civic group could raise dollars for some cause
Yeah.
that you want to see supported, and you could see the direct benefit, and those dollars can go directly to the from you to that organization or that program.
And in your mind, the people who are distributing those competitive grants and funds should be artists, or they should be
Artists
somebody
should be in the
creative
process.
in the process, right? It shouldn't
Yes,
just
yes.
be policymakers. Other people should be able to direct those and create those, because there are certain needs that maybe a policymaker wouldn't know. So you really have to understand the needs and how to give the funds in order to make it most effective.
Well, see, the thing is, we're always better off when we have subject experts
Yeah.
involved in the decision making process, and that's really what I'm advocating for. I am not interested in being at the behest of politicians who
Yeah.
have ways of doing political favors
Sure.
for individuals or donors of their own
Yeah.
to support certain organizations. And we still live in a world where racial bias and gender bias is still prevalent. We see that evident every day.
Every day.
So we shouldn't assume that that's not a factor in people's decision making. I mean, here's the reality: there's a uniformity to the complexion and the cultural perspective of most of our largest cultural organizations in the state of Michigan, and that's not by accident. That's by design. Foundations, individual donors, corporations, and the state, the government supported certain organizations at the expense of others, tax-paying others who haven't
Yes.
always gotten the same level of giving.
That's right. I want to follow up with that in two different ways. So let me just
Okay,
throw one of them out there and then we'll go to the
sure,
other one. But,
sure.
what you just said struck something in my mind. When I lived in New York City, I would go to off Broadway plays all the time because they
Uh-huh,
were cheap,
uh-huh,
right? I was so
uh-huh,
broke and like it was cheap and I could go. And
uh-huh,
everybody was there, like everybody, like,
mhm.
every
Yeah,
race, every,
yes.
income level, like you just
Mhm,
went. It was part of the
uh-huh,
culture. You went to
uh-huh,
theater, you went to
mhm.
music, watch music. And it was, there was constant, it was just diversity. Everywhere was
Right,
diversity
right,
and it just
right.
was a norm. I then moved to Chicago and I was horrified that I could not get a ticket for under $120 to see
Yeah,
any theater show, any Broadway
yeah.
show. And when you went, the lines, it was all extremely wealthy white people who
Yeah,
were standing in the lines, and that's who went and saw these shows. And there was a little bit of a lack of diversity, and it
mhm,
had to do a lot with the culture too. I could
right,
feel it in every part of that culture.
right.
And so there is a difference when you so the other part of this that I want to get to, there is a difference when you fund African American and Brown theater. And
Mhm.
it makes a difference. Tell us about why that matters.
Because you're getting the other parts of stories that you may have been exposed to from your own perspective, or you've only seen
Yeah.
stories told from one cultural perspective. And when you go to see a work done by a person of color, be they African American, Asian American, Indigenous, or of Latin ancestry, you're getting a different point of view. You're getting cultural norms
Yeah.
and values that are being communicated to you from a different perspective. The thing that always got me was the arrogance or world, and not just in the arts, but across the board, to assume that all truth resided in one people's story. And that's just not the
It's not the
case.
case.
No, and so what you have to do if you're going to be open and willing to learn, you have to comprehend that somebody else might have a better way of telling. It's not, and I don't mean to always attack the concepts of Western civilization, but to attack some of the concepts of Western civilization, I think that we give too much deification or divinity to works that come out of European academies or come from European nations at the expense of looking at perspectives from stories, from songs, from music they come from the rest of the world. There's just a greater breadth and depth of living because not everybody on this planet has lived the exact same way. Their development as a culture has not always been in the same fashion. And so, in many cases, a lot of what has been learned, a lot of the wisdom that exists in this planet, can be found in other people's lives, in other people's cultures, other people's perspectives on the world. And I think that makes us much richer.
Yeah.
I know it makes us much richer because it gives us the breadth. It's like if you had, it's think of it like a giant library, right?
Yeah.
And you only go to the same house with the same books, and you exclude all the breadth, the wisdom, and knowledge in the rest of the building. That's what we're talking about here. And so is a great writer, but Shakespeare isn't the greatest writer to have ever lived. I'm not going to say that. I used to believe that when I was growing up and I was studying at Wayne State University. I no longer believe that. I no longer believe that because I've been exposed to so much more. The
Yeah.
complexity of his characters and the kind of stories he tells about the human condition, they stop because of who and what he was and the world he lived in between the 15th, between the 16th and the 17th centuries. And therefore, the work that he did is embedded in amber in regards to that. Play like Timmy and the Shrew is entertaining, but it's not the most complex story about the dynamics between men and women.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
play like Othello can be enlightening, but it's not the most enlightened way of looking at the issues of a black man in a white dominant power structure.
Right.
It just isn't.
Right.
And so we shouldn't assume that
Mhm.
his works can still speak in all ways to us today, and that there aren't writers who have come since then that are equally as strong in craft, but have something far richer to say to us.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just to use maybe an imperfect metaphor, but it's like eating the same food that you grew up with the rest of your life and never
Right,
having any other food. It's fine.
right,
If that's what you like, it's fine. But
right,
if you have never tasted peanut chicken from West Africa or,
right,
pad thai from Thailand or
right.
something, you really haven't experienced all the different tastes that you can have in the world.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
it might change your palate. It might change what you like. It might change the way that you cook your own, like the food you grew up with. Maybe you want to
Mm-hmm,
add a little spice or to change a
mm-hmm,
little something. It
mm-hmm,
enriches your life. And
mm-hmm.
so the more diversity of experiences you have, the more you learn about, "Oh, actually, I don't like that. Or "Oh,
Right,
I really like this," right? It doesn't mean that all is equal. You're going to love everything and you're going to use every part of it equally in your life, but it does influence you.
absolutely.
And it
And that's the
changes your
point.
perspective and it broadens your perspective and it makes you more accepting of the fact that there are different tastes, there are different ideas, there are different people in the world who have different perspectives than my own. And it helps you to realize maybe you're not right about everything.
Right, absolutely. That's it.
So
What was the other question?
well, that was so it was first, it was just that reflection on culture. But what do
Okay.
you think in terms of like funding and seeing more, diversity of arts? How can we change the culture in order to be able to encourage more people to go out to see different
I
art
think we
forms?
need to. I think we need to because I think that's the only way we're going to get out of this. Right now, we're a society that's really sick. I mean, ill. That's part of that was exacerbated by the pandemic, being shut in. We are not engaging in public forums in the same way that we did before. Now, granted, look, if you're a fan of Taylor Swift's or you're a fan of Beyonce, you're going to go see them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't allow those type of events to make us think that we don't have an issue. But if you see attendance at performing arts going down, or you see people going out to restaurants, hanging out at movie theaters, experiencing free events in the park. I mean, where the barriers to you getting in or enjoying something so low,
Yeah.
you really need to think seriously about what we are doing that has discourage most of us to not want to be around most of us.
Yeah.
We need to think about that because we're losing this social cohesion. And I know there's been a lot of talk about loneliness
Yeah.
epidemic that's going on. And I know they've talked. It seems like if men get a cold, all of a sudden it becomes the worst illness on the face of the planet. Men have routinely been, as a group, not necessarily advocating for engagement outside of very narrow environment, places where they feel safe and their masculinity can be projected in ways that satisfies something. And I think now we're at a point where, in many cases, not just men, people in general are really suffering from engagement and connection in a real way. Things that matter, because the problem is that it's eroding what we call a civil society.
It is.
And we're not going to be able to survive that. The irony of civilization is that we started out as individuals in families, sometimes working solely with the energies and talents of the family. And then we branched out and started partnering and cooperating with those neighbors that are near us or people who were in groups that we joined. And eventually we began building civilizations, towns, cities, nations. And we're now at a point where we're receding in all of that.
Yeah.
The things that maintain a nation, the things that retain a society, a civilization, are being challenged. And part of it is economic. It's much more expensive to do anything. But also it's about there's a lack of willingness and a lack of comfortability to be with one another.
Well, and I will say, yeah, like I went from being one of the most social people to working at home and raising kids. All my clients are in DC. And after a few years of that, I forgot how to go out. I forgot how to dress. I forgot what I was supposed to say to people.
Right.
And my anxiety levels, like noise levels were difficult for me. And I was somebody who like loved clubbing, loved the loud music.
Right.
And
Right.
it was really, really hard. And I think that now that you have so many people in that situation where they're working from home, maybe two people working from home, that comfort level of going out to experience something, we have to figure out a way to really encourage people to start doing that again. I don't know what the answer is, but it's a
It is
problem.
important. It's a problem, and it's also important that we begin to connect people's desires to achieve something that helps them feel connected to the world, to what the tools that we use to get to where we are. The arts, social gathering, celebration. Those are the kind of things that made us. I tell this story all the time. So after the Civil War, there was this phenomenon that cropped up around most of the nation, where communities created brass bands, community bands,
Oh,
and they would then invest in parks or portions of the park where you could see the band perform, all these pavilions that would be existing in these parks to encourage people to come out and hear music played for free for nothing more than their sheer enjoyment. Because music, the trajectory of music being incorporated in the daily lives of people really starts with us being able to access it in public before before the average person begins to think about purchasing a piano, which is a piece of furniture
yeah.
taking up space in your house. That's not like a washing machine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you
Or
try and move that to a new house, right?
right. And think about that. A piano or other musical instruments that you would have within your home, those require you to invest leisure time into using them. For them to be useful or to be something that you appreciate, somebody's got to invest time in playing the piano.
Yeah.
And then you have to invest time in listening to them play the piano,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of the knitting that can occur of a group or social group or even a society. So you go back to the brass bands. And part of the reason why we needed brass bands at the time following the Civil War was that was the way we were looking at knitting back communities. Because in some cases, we had families fighting families in that conflict. We had people who had suffered significant loss. And this was a way for them to connect again, even
Yeah.
though they may be in parts of the nation where everybody was on once. The idea was this was a communal event that really brought us together for
Hmm.
the sheer enjoyment of listening to the music. And I think that we forget that is, in essence, the real gift of the arts. It is not, like I
Yeah.
said, it's not an economic instrument. It's really that type of social cohesion, that kind of framing and helping us understand the power and the joy of being together and experiencing events like this together. And so I think that that's what we need to do. We need to fix many of our problems. We need
Yeah.
to find ways of pulling people together. And I know that the challenge of going back to the mass shooting epidemic, that makes you more vulnerable. But I can't believe that us giving that up is going to benefit us in the long run. We can't do that. We can't live out of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't. Tell me about your why. Why do you work in theater and advocacy?
I am in theater because that is the reason why I wake up every morning. I wake up every morning to expose myself the ways in which I can create stories, share them with people that can help them understand things about themselves, things about the world. They help them just be able to navigate the challenges of reality. And that's the truth. I mean, it's a broad statement, but that's pretty much it. I understand so much more about parts of my life because of plays I saw. I tell this story all the time. I was still here at Wayne in college, and in 1988, I went to New York for the first time to visit a friend of mine who had been a student at Wayne and had transferred to Juilliard. And so I went to see him, and while I was there, I saw a bunch of theater. One of the shows I saw was the original production of Fences with
Okay.
James
Yeah.
Earl Jones,
Wow.
Mary Alice, Ray Orena.
Would have been cool.
Man, and the play is about a Black man who's a father, hasn't
Yeah.
he's been focused almost exclusively on his responsibilities and has an estranged relationship with his oldest son and has a younger son that he's very hard on.
Yeah.
That he at the time during the play, we find out that his frustrations, his life, the limitations that he has, he takes them out by having an affair with another woman that produces a child. And the relationship between the son, the young son, and Troy Maxon, the father, comes to a head in a couple of scenes, but one in particular that really struck me at home was the one when the son they were fixing this fence. That's why the place called Fences. They were building this fence around the house, and the boy asked him, why didn't you ever love me?" He asked the father plain, and the father the response is a response that he wants to give. That wasn't part of the bargain. I wasn't asked to love you. I was asked to
Wow.
take care of you. I was asked to feed you. I was asked to put
Yeah.
a roof over your head. And he said, why do you think I did that? And the boy says, because you love me. He said, if you think that's the reason why I did it, you're a damn fool. Did it because of my responsibility. It was very harsh reality. But that scene was a scene that had played out in my own life with my own father. He wasn't a garbage man, and hadn't played in the Negro Leagues, but he was a man who,
Yeah.
for the majority of my life, I did not understand why he treated me the way he did. And what I realized, but I didn't realize it until that moment, he had been dead. 1988, my father had been dead for 6 years.
Uh,
He had drank himself to death.
okay. I'm
And I
sorry.
didn't,
I'm
and
sorry.
that's fine. It's been quite a while. But there were scenes in that play that could have been written from somebody observing my life. That questioning of his father was there. There's a later scene where the young boy, who's now a man, comes back home, and it's the day of his father's funeral. And he tells his mother he's not going to his dad's funeral. That was a scene that I played out with my own mom. I had told her I wasn't going to go. That the way I felt about my father, I could not see myself giving him the respect of going and acting like I was mourning for his death, like there was a
Yeah.
loss in my life, because there wasn't. And I had not cried for my father.
Huh?
I resented him.
Yeah.
And in the play, when Corey, the son, breaks down and cries at the end of the play, I began to cry. For the first time in my life, I cried for my father. And it was because this play, written by a man who didn't know me,
Yeah.
spoke so clearly to the experiences I had had, the challenges and the frustrations and the pain that I had experienced in my own life with my own father in my own
Yeah.
home. And the power of that
Yeah.
was the honesty and the authenticity and the clarity was something that I could only experience in the theater and not through a book. Because I had read the play before I went to see it, so I knew the
Yeah.
story. I knew how the
Yeah.
play was going to,
Yeah.
and I had
Yeah.
never reacted that way
Right.
to the
Yeah.
I see this show on stage in front of me, and I'm in a theater with a bunch of folks,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, these scenes resonate with me in a way that I was not prepared for.
The actor was doing their job, the director did their job. They were able
Right,
to bring it to you that you felt it
right,
in your heart, and that's what artists do.
right, right, and so I identified with Corey, the young son, in that play. Several years later, when I directed it, I was I was now a father of 2,
Mhm.
and I was in my 40s, and so I was like 15, about 15 years older. And um, my life, yeah, I started Plowshares. I was a theater director.
Yeah.
And so I had all these experiences, but I'd had some frustrations. I understood Troy's plight a lot more than I did when I was seeing the play in front of me. And so the second time when I was directing the play, I identified with Troy. Not because for a whole host of reasons, I was able to hear
Right.
his story differently.
Yeah.
And that's the power of art.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your maturation as a human being, when you engage great art, when you connect to great art,
Yeah.
you're able to continue to go back to it and get something more out of it
Yeah.
because it's so rich.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing that, for me, that's the greatest gift that the arts provide to us. That's why
And
I
you're
keep
able to
saying,
do that. You're able to do
yeah,
that to audiences all
right.
the time.
And that's exactly what I want to do. That's exactly why I do it, because I want somebody to sit in my audience and have that experience.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
How beautiful. Thank you for being on this podcast. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you for re recording it many, many times.
Not a problem. I'm happy. I think the arts are critical to our lives, and it's important for us to be seriously about how we maintain them, support and sustain them. So, yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about support the funding of art and the reforming of how we fund it in this state, anywhere I can go.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for doing the work to restore or help to support the arts and the funding. Take
Thank you.
care, Gary. Enjoy the rest
All
of
right.
your day.
You as well.